Well, the feud between President Trump and CNN's Jim Acosta now shifting from the briefing room to the courtroom. This after the White House pulled Acosta's press credentials. But has the White House made a misstep here, and what could the impact be? We're going to ask our legal team to weigh in on that. But first, let's bring in senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman with more, and it's a developing story.
It is, Rich, and in the Trump era, there's not a whole lot that can unite the entire White House press corps, but it seems this case now headed to federal court is doing just that. First, the background. Trump and Acosta, as you know, have had a prickly relationship for some time. It all boiled over last Wednesday at the president's post-midterm press conference.
I may ask one other question, Mr. President. If I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President, I was
that's
going
enough.
to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President.
That's enough.
Mr. President, I had one other question, if I may ask, on the Russia investigation. Are you concerned that you may have?
I'm not concerned about anything with the Russian investigation because it's a hoax. That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
The White House suspended Acosta's hard pass the next day, originally claiming Acosta assaulted the White House intern and tweeted out this doctored video to make their case. Turns out the woman is a paid White House staffer, not an intern. And after the video was widely criticized, the story from the White House changed. Now they say Acosta is being suspended for being rude and disrespectful. In response, CNN filed suit in federal court, and their suit is picking up backers, most notably Fox News. In a Macy's sends customers to Gimbals moment, Fox News President Jay Wallace wrote, Fox News supports CNN in its efforts to regain its reporter's press credential. We intend to file an amicus brief with the U.S. District Court. Secret Service passes for working White House journalists should never be weaponized. While we don't condone the growing antagonistic tone by both the president and press at recent media avails, we do support a free press, access, and open exchanges for the American people. And they're not alone. Other news outlets, including the AP, Bloomberg, Gannett, NBC News, the New York Times, Politico, and the Washington Post, also filed briefs in support of Acosta and CNN. A judge heard arguments in the case today. A decision is expected tomorrow. Meanwhile, the White House put out a statement of its own related to the suit, writing in part, after Mr. Acosta asked the president 2 questions, each of which the president answered, he physically refused to surrender a White House microphone to an intern so that other reporters might ask their questions. This was not the first time this reporter has inappropriately refused to yield to other reporters. The White House cannot run an orderly and fair press conference when a reporter acts this way, which is neither appropriate nor professional. CNN, as you might expect, does not share that view, and they hired Ted Olson, who represented George W. Bush in the 2000 Florida recount case in the Supreme Court, to handle this suit. He laid out the reason he expects the network to win the case.
The First Amendment requires robust, aggressive reporting. Reporters must be free to ask tough questions and to be persistent about it, and they don't bow down or take an oath before they walk into that White House press room. They have to be independent, free, and aggressive.
All right, Andrew, thank you. And along with Andrew, I want to bring in our legal panel now. Doug Von Oist, founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct, also selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country. Mayo Bartlett, attorney at the law offices of Mayor Bartlett PLLC, former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. Guys, I want to get into the legal of this. There's also the political. Andrew, from a practical standpoint, in terms of how, in this case, the White House, but we deal with, governor's offices, congressional offices, both statewide and local, there's a way to handle the press and not. I can certainly argue that Acosta, if not showboating there, he was annoying that day. Mm-hmm. That all said, there was a bunch of different ways they could have handled him. Not even from a legal perspective, they could have taken away his day pass for the day. But they went full nuclear, and they also alleged that there was an assault, which they then changed. But the biggest problem is what the president himself had to say.
Well, the president keeps changing the story, too. I mean, it was Sarah Sanders who originally said it was because he laid his hands on the woman who worked there. The president has made it more and more clear in the days since that it's because he thinks that Acosta is disrespectful, and he doesn't like Acosta, and they just keep going back and forth. So this is really a personal decision, a preferential decision, if you will, to boot Acosta out. The White House Correspondents Association is incensed because there are procedures that you would go through in a case like this. If you had a legitimate beef against a reporter, the White House would probably have a sit down with the heads and the executives at CNN and discuss it like you would any personnel matter. That didn't happen here either. They also didn't go through the Correspondents Association. So there's a lot of questions about the process that went through. And then, of course, there's the overall question, which is, the press is supposed to have free and unfettered access to
And
public
to that
officials.
end, Mayo, the president said in no uncertain terms after this incident, meaning the president, I can suspend if I don't like the question and I don't like the questioner, I can suspend anybody's press credentials if I want.
Well,
And he made it arbitrary. So there's two primary legal arguments that CNN's going to argue here. First Amendment rights and due process. Which of those two do you think they have a stronger argument?
Well, I think that the First Amendment actually, to me, is the strongest, because you're now at the point where you're actually curtailing the ability to have a free press. And when you look at totalitarian regimes like in North Korea, you don't get any questions of Kim Jong-un. You only applaud and smile and say yes to whatever it is he wants to do. I don't think that's what we want. And I think that it's particularly interesting that Fox News came in with an amicus brief, because it's not inconceivable that Barack Obama could have said, hey, you know what, you guys are critical of me. We're just going to not answer anything that Fox News says.
That's not even a hypothetical. They never suspended altogether, did the Obama administration, Fox's ability to be in the press room, but they had chose not to ask questions after there was what they perceived disrespectful exchanges. Then the other networks came in and said, hey, listen, you can't single somebody out just because you don't like them, and then they began to give them access again. Doug, between the First Amendment right and the due process, that there is unequal application here in effect, which do you think is stronger that Olson's got to argue here?
I think they're both equally as strong. I mean, the press is the First Amendment, the press under the First Amendment, it's in the Constitution, plus the due process argument of actually giving somebody an opportunity to be heard before you take this away. But if you look at this lawsuit, it may not be that crazy of Trump, because he's actually, you can envision a court saying, yes, you can't do this, but you certainly have the right to command your press conference, to stop people from asking questions.
The problem was he didn't make that argument. I'm with you that you could have argued, and I think it wouldn't have been unfair, that Acosta went out of his lane. He decided the rules wouldn't apply. He'd keep asking the questions and everything else. He didn't give up the mic when he should have given up the mic. I'll grant you all that. But the president arbitrarily said, just like he did, if you remember, with the NBC anchor, as to why he fired Comey, right? He volunteered too much. He's like the worst kind of defendant when you got to represent him, right? He said, I can take anybody's whenever I want because.
But the problem is he can't start a lawsuit by saying, hey, they won't behave in my press conference. The way he's starting his lawsuit is the most extreme way. I'm taking it away. Now let's let a court get involved and say, okay, you can't take it away, but you certainly can tell people what, you've had enough time.
And I'll just point out, the White House the president doesn't have to call on Jim Acosta. He could skip CNN every single time if he wanted to. That's another step the White House could have taken, but didn't.
But then you get to the point again where you don't really have a free press. And at some point, the reason we have these press conferences is so that the American people get information. It's not entertainment. So if you decide you're going to sidestep any real question, and also at some point you as the president should be obligated to answer the questions. So if you're asked a simple question, you routinely avoid the answer.
You can't force people to take truth serum and be transparent or even engage the question. But you're right that you can't decide I'm only going to have, if you're a Democrat, a liberal press corps, or if I'm a Republican, I'm only going to have a conservative press corps. It doesn't work that way. I believe when it's said and done, the White House is going to cave for a different reason altogether. Not even the optics of it. I believe it's because of a thing called discovery. If all of a sudden, can you imagine if the White House sticks to their guns, going to fight this? Now, Kellyanne Conway, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, they're going to, under oath, have to answer questions as to who gave you the directive. Did you check that the tape was manufactured or altered as Andrew did? Who told you who is going to be allowed, under what decisions? We're going to see a host and a rash. They're not going to stick themselves out and risk perjury here. Now all of a sudden it's a lawsuit.
No one will remember.
There's a danger because there's a lot of people involved in a press department for any White House, and you got enough people that have been either shown the door or whatever else. I think, anybody debate, I think this thing gets resolved here before it goes through court or no?
I think so.
No, I don't think it does. I think that you're going to hear a judge's decision on this.
I agree.
It'll be fascinating if that happens. All right, when we come back, El Chapo's trial underway in Brooklyn. Dominic Carter, our man on the scene. He joins us live with the very latest on the unprecedented security and how the jury is dealing with this and more.